One of my favorite quotes, made more famous lately by Ted Lasso, is be curious, not judgmental. And I bring this up today because I think this is a very important thing to remember throughout the season, to be curious and not judgmental. Throughout the season, between myself as a director, coaches, parents, and players, we all have different perspectives of what happens on the field, at practice, or in games. We're all seeing things a little differently from our own perspective, whether a player on the field, parent on the sideline watching their kids in the team, the coach watching the players on the field and the players on the sideline, and myself as a director kind of watching over everything. We all have different perspectives. So a lot of times throughout the season, we might see something that seems off to us, that maybe doesn't make sense, that we have concerns about. And what we do more often than not is keep it to ourselves or talk to somebody else. We don't ask questions. We're not curious about it. And this is something I stress to all my players, parents, and coaches of the season, is to communicate and talk to one another through the season. Often, when you see something that seems off or something that doesn't align with what you would expect, a conversation asking each other about kind of what's going on is the simplest way to kind of get to an understanding of what is happening. Without that, in a vacuum, it can only be filled with assumptions, and assumptions usually turn into anger and frustration, and usually to a point where it, a boiling point that things explode and it gets very emotional. So that communication is key. And often what it shows is something is like that we saw something very different than somebody else. By asking questions, by being curious, it allows us to hear what the other person is seeing, why they're thinking and maybe saying and doing the things they're doing. When we take this approach, we learn a ton. As coaches, particularly with parents, when you ask questions to parents, you will learn a ton about the family, about the players, which helps you do your job better on the field. And as parents, when you ask questions to the coaches, you learn more about what the team is doing and their approach and the philosophy and why. Will everyone agree all the time? Absolutely not. But we understand where the other person's coming from. We're not making any assumptions. As players, the same thing is true. Talk to your parents, ask questions. Talk to the coaches, ask questions. Talk to your directors, ask questions if something seems off, if you need clarification. And with those questions comes answers and an understanding. And again, not necessarily agreement, but an understanding. And then people can make decisions based on information about what's best for them. Do I stay with the team? Do I move on? Do I, ask additional questions, or do I, anything you want to do at that point, you have the information to make an informed decision. The other side of this is we're not robots. I hear a goalkeeper director, Kirby, say this all the time to our goalkeeper players when they're training. You're not robots. You've got to make decisions on the field. And as people, we're not robots, and we have emotions. And sometimes we can see something, in a moment that, has a lot of underlying things we don't know about. A lot of our coaches or coaches in general have different jobs for the day. They have their own personal lives. Something very bad could have happened before they arrived at training or the game, so they're a little off. They're not exactly how they normally are. Same thing with a player, same thing with a parent. We all have bad moments, for whatever reason. So sometimes when we see that, if we just kind of ask some questions, dig a little deeper, we gain a much deeper understanding and knowledge of the other people we are working with throughout the season to make it a great season. And I think it shows respect. And respect for one another, respect for what everyone does, respect for what coaches do as a coach, respect for what parents have to do as parents, respect for what players have to do as players, and respect for directors for what they have to do as directors. When you ask questions, you're curious, not judgmental, and you kind of try to learn and listen first and speak second. It makes a drastic difference on the quality of a season for everybody involved. And again, I'll stress this. You might not always agree, and you might decide to make a decision to, move to a different team or find a different situation for your child as a coach, a different team to coach, as a player, a different team to play on. But you're doing it based on information and not just emotion or assumptions, which is a huge important factor in, choosing the right path for yourself.